Welcome to Week Old Beans episode 11. I am Ardot, and then I've got my host, Fowler. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I am Fowler.
Alright, that was a bit milquetoast, but it's fine.
How would you have done it?
I would have said, more than 2 words. Or 3 words.
I'm the Hemingway of podcasters. Brevity is my strength.
I don't think, you want to flatter yourself that much, Fowler, but tell the people what we're going to be talking about today, because, as news weeks go, a lot of shit happened over the past 7 days. So why don't you let the people know what we're going to be talking about today?
We're actually doing a story that's relatively recent, and we're doing a story that's a little old that we haven't covered yet. So the recent stories, we're going to talk about Trump's third indictment and sort of the implications of that. And then also, even though it's been in the news for about a week and a half now, we're going to talk about the U.S. government, or parts of it at least, claiming that there are aliens they have captured.
Yeah, both stories very weird. I think we should start with the indictment first, Fowler, because that's honestly the most important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm nervous about covering the aliens thing because I feel like we made ourselves look like fools by speculating about the Russian Civil War when Prigozhin uh, started to attack the Capitol.
Yeah, but nobody watches our podcast, so it's fine. It's okay. um, yeah, the alien shit is that what's interesting about the alien shit has less to do with whether or not it's actually real and more to do with the implications of it not being real.
Hmm.
But we'll start with the third indictment. Third time's the charm for former President Donald J. Trump. He has been indicted by Jack Smith's special counsel for his
4 counts,
attempt.
I believe.
4 counts, yes.
Yeah.
For his attempts at overturning the 2020 election, as well as inciting a insurrection against the United States. This is nobody really thought this was coming. It's if you remember the beginning of this year and last year as well, there was the January 6th commission, and that was a televised event that occurred over the course of several months. But we're into 2023, elections coming up in 2024, and Jack Smith, who was appointed by the Justice Department to handle this, has settled on 4 counts.
One of the things that makes Jack Smith kind of, I think, more of a threat to Trump is not just that the charges of basically like the Jan 6 stuff and trying to overturn the election and create a mob. Not only is that like a much more slam dunk case than like the New York case, which I think it's like harder to win.
Yeah, well,
But also Jack Smith has explicitly said that he intends to prosecute Trump before well before the election. So this will have way larger implications on the presidential race than the other indictments.
Yeah, I don't really know how this stands in comparison as well to the documents case as well. I remember because there's 3 different investigations going on right now, and then also a fourth in Georgia as well. And there's there have also
just
been
to go over them really quickly. There's the
yeah.
New York case, which is about using hush or campaign finances to pay off a porn star. That's the weakest case, I think.
Yeah.
There's the Florida case, I think, right? It's Florida where it's
No, the
basically
Mar-a-Lago document.
Yeah, is it Florida? Which state is that in?
I don't think that that's a state thing. I think that is.
That's federal too.
Uh.
Well, anyways, the case is basically about him.
That's the Justice Department.
Documents,
that is the
classified documents, and attempting to basically like obstruct justice of the pulling back the documents.
Yes.
With the Jan 6 stuff, and then also he might be prosecuted at some point in Georgia for the elector bullshit and trying to overturn the Georgia results of the 2020 election. So
Yes.
it's
Real quick, Fowler, before you continue, the Mar-a-Lago case is being handled by the Justice Department, not by Florida.
okay.
Uh, the most recent case that he was indicted for is being handled by a special counsel um, that has been investigating him since January 6th, and the fourth case that's also being handled, and the case that I believe, this week, I know we say we don't make predictions, but I will knock on wood right now and say that I am very, very certain that this upcoming week, Trump is also going to be indicted in Atlanta, in Fulton County, by Fannie Williams and the grand jury, um, for his attempts at overturning the election in Georgia. If you guys remember, he made a phone call to Brad Raffensperger, who is or I guess who was the Georgia Secretary of State, and for the most part threatened him. He also attempted to contact Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and have Kemp overturn the election results in the state of Georgia. I think this week that will also come to a crescendo, and he will be indicted. But I mean, I'm maybe not making time predictions, but I'm willing to bet he's gonna be fucked in Georgia too. So potentially four indictments that we're looking at. I know we've got three right now, and um, the one that has just occurred is probably the most consequential of all the ones, because it deals directly with his attempts at overturning the 2020 election, something that he attempted to do, and we know he attempted to do.
Yeah, one of the downsides of being the president is that you're surrounded by Secret Service and aides, so it's very difficult to get away with a lot of criminal shit. And yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely the most serious case legally for him, and it's also the most serious case, I think, optically, because if they end up ruling that basically he did try and overthrow democracy, it's basically over for him. Whereas he
Um,
might be able to slide through, like you can sneak past financial impropriety, I think, or like bureaucratic bullshit in a way that you can't if Jack Smith is successful.
yes, and although I don't know, I mean, based on the polling, it looks as if we've hit. It looks as if we have hit. Trump supporters are going to support Trump regardless of what he does, regardless of whether or not he attempted to overturn democracy. Trump's main base is is rallying behind him regardless, in large part because they agree with what he tried to do, because they don't believe the election was legitimate. And I believe the GOP, um, the moderate wing of the GOP, which most likely does not want Trump to be the nominee, they have resigned themselves to, having Trump as the nominee because their alternative candidates have also turned out to be fucking dog shit as well.
It'll
Uh,
definitely be interesting to see where the Overton window lies, but as a term of caution, the vast majority of Republicans were against Nixon being impeached and the investigation into Nixon's impropriety. And then after the election finished, or the sorry, not the election, the investigation finished, and Nixon was pretty, objectively proven to have done all the criminal things that they claimed he did. Like Nixon's support evaporated. It was like 16% of Republican voters claimed they had voted for Nixon in the last election. So I
do
don't
you
know.
do
I
you
mean,
think it's going to be the same?
Trump has an amazing ability to weather adversity, but um, I don't know if he's had a slam dunk case against him. Like the Russian investigation, they indicted a shit ton of people, but they didn't indict Trump himself. And then um, you know, plausibly the hush money stuff was done through Michael Cohen. So like I think the thing that's dangerous in particular about the election meddling is unlike other cases of Trump, it's not like guys around Trump are doing shady stuff. It's like he's directly calling people, he's directly inciting the mob, he's directly removing the metal detectors. So I think I don't know, it might end up that they it doesn't matter and um he the Trump voters don't care. But I do think this requires more denial of reality than anything that Trump has faced so far.
I absolutely agree with your assessment. I think too one of the things that I worry about is and I don't think legally he's going to be able to slip this under the rug, but I definitely think, and I don't know if this was planned. I don't know if it might have just been circumstance. I definitely think that him being indicted first for the tax fraud was probably one of the worst things that could have happened. And the reason I say this is because if you look at the media attention that was given to his first indictment, every single news organization across the world was doing wall to wall coverage, 24 hours of him being indicted. And you look at it now. You look at the coverage now of his indictment. It seems to be like, oh, he's just being indicted, again, and it's not really that big of a deal. Obviously it's a big deal, but the way it's being covered in comparison to his first indictment, there's not that media storm. And I think for something of this magnitude, there being a media storm around this would have probably hurt Trump because the allegations and the contents of the indictment are so severe in comparison to the tax fraud shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would be very curious to pop the lid of the engine up of media companies. I wonder if like people are exhausted of Trump. There's Trump fatigue, and like while there's a point he was like a guaranteed like story to get eyeballs on you. I wonder if because there's been multiple indictments and because he's been outrageous for so long, like quietly a lot of media companies are like he is not like the heroine of news that like he used to be. He is not like an immediate like I will sell out every all my copies, and I wonder if that's why they're backing off a little bit on him.
Yeah.
It
It's
could
just
also be it could also be another media strategy where like after giving what was it like 1.6 billion dollars of free advertising to Trump in the 2016 election, it could be the media is finally realizing that wall to wall coverage of him.
only helps him.
Yeah, so it could also be like a move from above, but
Sure.
I would doubt that because if that's the case, they're turning down like hundreds of millions of dollars basically.
Oh yeah. Well, and if we know anything about corporations, they will never. Well, what was it? The quote that you told me about? The capitalists will use the
The
noose to,
capitalists will sell me the rope I used to hang him with.
yeah, or whatever the fuck. Um,
Yeah.
um, say which I have my apprehensions about quoting a man like that because I disagree with him, but he was not wrong about that. That's just unfortunately how the market works. But sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes people have sense. Uh, so it probably is, it could be what you said. Um, that they are realizing that giving him free publicity is not doing them any favors. Um, it's interesting the level of contact that like Fox News has with elected officials in comparison to the liberal side. You know,
Mm.
and I wonder if behind the scenes that's also what's happening. Is that you have members of government on the Democratic side, because they mingle in the same circles. I know they do. If you're a rich media owner, you're mingling in the same circles as the rich politician.
Mm.
And I
Very
wonder
true.
if there's been hints given, from the Democratic side to these news organizations, the ones that are on their side at least, that they need to stop, uh, or they need to pull back, or it could just be a matter of market. I don't know. Is Fox News still covering Trump the same way? I don't watch Fox News, so
I
I can't
think
tell.
I think they've sort of rearranged things. I know that the Murdoch family that runs Fox News and a couple of the higher ups are anti-Trump, and they've been trying to quietly shift focus away from him and inflate others like DeSantis. Also, Tucker Carlson. I mean, he privately hated Trump, but he was one of Trump's biggest proponents, and so I think firing him and then changing their programming might mean that they're not supporting him the way they did.
Well, Jesse
I think
Waters has
it's
taken Tucker's spot, and Jesse Waters has none of Tucker Carlson's rhetoric and all of his nastiness, and he's only really further proven to make Fox News look like a hack network. Jesse Waters just does not command the audience that Tucker does.
Yeah, although it was definitely symbiotic because Tucker has like a Twitter show that nobody watches now. So,
But so let's look at this indictment. So I have it open. You
okay.
can look it up. Actually, it's the United States versus Donald J. Trump. Absolutely incredible. Um, I'm not going to
If
read through
Jack
this whole
Smith
thing.
plays, if Jack Smith plays his cards right, in 40 years, the equivalent of Meryl Streep will play him in a critically acclaimed movie.
Directed by Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan's like 90.
Robert Downey Jr. will blow everyone away by playing Donald Trump perfectly.
Yeah. Or just Gary Oldman in a fat suit. Gary Oldman is also still alive in 40 years. um, one of those two actors. Uh, so I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's pretty much it says exactly what you think it says, which is basically that Donald Trump had a right to challenge the election legally, and he chose not to. He had a right to speak about the election and his disagreements with the results of the election in a way that was lawful, and he chose not to do that, as we know. And so he is being charged with. So he's being charged with 3, not 4.
Okay.
He's being charged with 3 counts. The first count, a conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S.C. 371. A conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6 congressional proceedings at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified, in quotes, the certification proceeding, in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1512K. A conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted, in violation of 18 U.S.C. 241. So those are the 3 counts he's being charged with. Each of these conspiracies, which built on the widespread mistrust the defendant was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud, targeted a bedrock function of the United States federal government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. So we have, conspiracy to defraud, and, count 1, they go through everything. They name 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They name about 7 co-conspirators in this document. Now, they don't name the co-conspirators. They don't say who they are, but for sure we know 3 of them are Rudy Giuliani. I think it's Susan Powell, and then I think it was a man named Eastman. Do you remember who Eastman was, John?
I do not. There are so many people. The Trump administration has committed so many crimes involving so many people. Like I remember covering the Russia investigation. It was like 15 indictments. I was like, I cannot keep track of which Trump stooge communicated with which Russian official.
John Eastman. We know for a fact that at least that 3 of these 7 co-conspirators named are Rudy Giuliani, Susan Powell, and Eastman. I've not been able to pinpoint who the other ones are because I don't keep up with Trump's posse like that. I don't. I don't follow them like they're the Avengers of failing at doing coups.
You don't follow the Avengers very closely either. So
I mean, yeah, but like I can name 6 of them. So I don't know now. I don't know what charges are going to be brought. I'm assuming that the mention of these people in the document means that there are going to be charges brought against these co-conspirators as well in the future. Just looking through this. Yeah, so it essentially, I mean, I'm hopefully those listening have paid attention for the past year and a half, really since 2020. And I think everybody paid attention to the shit show that was the 2020 election. Um, After the votes have been counted, in between, November and January. Um, but this document and Jack Smith's investigation, it covers all the bases. It covers the uh, attempts by Trump to call members of Congress and members of or members of state governments to try to overturn the election. It covers the knowledge of militiamen within the protesters that stormed the Capitol, and Trump's willingness to use them to essentially carry out harming members of Congress, and pretty much everything you think about. Um,
Hmm.
so now all we have to do is just wait to see how this plays out. I mentioned before we started the podcast, I'm curious to see if this goes to the Supreme Court. Now I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what cases constitute being viewed by the Supreme Court. I don't know if the Supreme Court would step in for something like this because this has never really happened before. Uh,
I don't think I could be wrong, but I read in one of the articles, I think the one in CBS, I don't think they can do it that way. Like
okay.
I think it has to go through the legal process and it has to kind of rise through the ranks to get to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and that, from what I remember, I do remember that it could take decades for Supreme Court cases, if they're coming from a lower court to get to the desk of the non-Supreme Court justices. So,
Also, if Jack Smith is actually, because he seems emphatic that like the indictment's going to happen, or he's going to finish the investigation before the 2024 election, that's way too fast, I think, for the Supreme Court to be involved.
yeah. So, going back to the documents case, I mean, I don't want to take the documents lightly. The indictment about the Mar-a-Lago stuff, because there is evidence that has not been presented to the public from that case, and I'm curious as to what evidence they have on this that they've not brought to the public yet. Um,
I think perhaps the media not being as obsessive about it could be good, not just because it won't give Donald Trump exposure, but like I remember the Russia investigation about whether or not Donald Trump colluded with the Russians. The media was incredibly inappropriate in the way they covered it. They were speculating constantly. They were claiming things that weren't necessarily a fact. And when, in the end, the Russia investigation found criminal acts but didn't find like evidence that Donald Trump was directly successful, like it was like a hot air exploding, a balloon exploding, you know? And I
yeah, one
think,
that's been, it's funny that Russian stuff has been used by defenders of Trump. They say, look at the Russians, look at the Russians, look what happened with Russia. This can't be real. Look what happened. You know what I mean?
yeah. So
Um,
I think maybe them pulling back is a positive thing because they do have a tendency to overhype things. I mean, the weakest case for Trump is the New York case, which was the one the media hyped up the most. But like,
yeah,
if you listen to legal experts and all that, they would tell you that like not only is it the least serious charge, but it's also the one that's hardest to prove. Whereas like some of the other cases that the media hasn't covered as aggressively, the Mar-a-Lago classified document stuff, the Jack Smith case with the coup, essentially, like we have way more evidence and it's way more conclusive.
yeah,
That
you
he
might be right about that. Um, you might be right about that. So it might be a perfect storm, but we're going to be following this case as it proceeds. Maybe next week we'll talk more about that. I'm wanting to move on because we're at the 24-minute mark and we got to talk about the aliens.
Okay.
We have to talk
Or
about the
not
aliens.
the last time we speculated, you theorized about Russian civil war. So I advise you as your host to temper your.
Look, that's just my media brain thinking. I'm like, I want some juicy deets. If Russia balkanizes, we're going to be talking about that shit for 6 months. Um, nah, it's content brain. Sorry, need to get a better hold of that. But no, we got to talk about the aliens because it's stupid, but it's fun. It's stupid fun. So if I could, so if I could set the scene for y'all, if anybody viewing has seen the first Michael Bay Transformers movie, there's a scene in that movie where like a bunch of government agents are like, this shit is serious. Like they like go to the Secretary of Defense and they show him like a briefcase of like one of the Mars rovers getting fucked up by a Decepticon, and they're like, yeah, this is like what we've been investigating in a secret government facility since Herbert Hoover built Hoover Dam in the early 1900s. That's essentially what's going on right now. Just like less cool and with less explosions. So, do you want to cover this, Fowler, or do you want me to?
You cover it.
I sent you the article, so you gotta pull your weight in this segment. I can't just be yapping for 20 more minutes, because I will say something dumb, and then you'll feel regret for not stopping me.
You start it, and then I'll continue it after.
All right. So, over the past couple weeks, all right, there has been a man. Last name Grusch, Grusch, who has been testifying in front of a congressional committee about he claims, the federal government's cover-up of unidentified flying objects. Or, as they're called now, UAPs, unidentified, or, yeah, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenons. They changed the name.
Significantly worse.
Yeah, it's so much less cool than UFOs. They changed the name because they were like, UFOs have such a bad connotation, but it's the same shit. And so, this man has been testifying in front of a congressional committee for the past 2 weeks, and he's made some fucking crazy claims. He's claimed that the United States is in possession of alien spacecraft of non-terrestrial origins, that the U.S. has essentially, that the U.S. has, like, non- or biological alien matter, and that the Vatican is involved.
And the Chinese.
That the Vatican is covering up proof of aliens, which has led people to pressure the Vatican to reveal things about the aliens, as if the Vatican is, like, gonna reveal shit.
Props for the Vatican. I thought, given how busy they are molesting kids,
I was trying to fit a priest pedo joke in there, but I fumbled the bag. Thank you. Thank you for doing that for me, Fowler. I was like, how can I fit that in there? The Department of Defense and NASA have said that they don't have any evidence of alien life or of a government program. So the whole thing is kind of a clusterfuck. Like, I kind of feel stupid covering it, and the reason I feel stupid covering it is because it's like, and this is the point that there was an article that I read yesterday, and it made a very good point, and the point was, either a bunch of people in very, very high positions of government are like bullshitting and leading Congress around on a goose chase for no fucking reason, or there are UFOs. Now, I don't know which one of those is worse. I don't know.
Congress lying to this degree is definitely, or the government lying to this degree is definitely the worst. Because if it ends up being that there are no aliens and this is all bullshit, we'll like literally not ever be able to trust anything the government says to us again.
Yeah. So there are a lot of implications, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, that, putting aside whether or not you think aliens are real, because quite frankly, that's not the most interesting thing about this story. The most interesting thing about it is, why, and maybe what it is, and I didn't mention this yesterday, Fowler, I mean, maybe it's that Congress itself has degenerated to such a degree that they would be willing to take seriously claims like this, This could be a matter of Congress and Congress's inability to get their shit together to focus on to focus on like quote unquote real issues such as climate change and economic instability and the rise of fascism. I don't know. Um, or unions or all the other crazy shit that's going on, which is drawing away a lot of the media attention. If this were happening in 2007, this would be on the front page of every fucking magazine. But it seems like even the media is hesitant to cover a lot of these stories, and with good reason.
I mean, the Republicans have done a lot of pretty crazy committees since taking back the House, so this might be kind of a bread and circus thing with them. I think the indictment is just way more important and has way more implications, so people have been ignoring it.
Also, as I've said many times, if the Vatican has been covering up aliens, I don't know what the fuck they want me to do about that. I don't, you know what I mean? Are the aliens here? Are they coming to take my house? Are they coming to fuck my wife? No.
I think it was Stephen Hawking who said that, like, if there are aliens and they are powerful enough and technologically advanced enough that they can intergalactically travel, he said that, like, basically they would view us technologically as like insects, and they would probably enslave and murder us. And I'm sort of in his camp. Like, if there actually are aliens and they actually give
Why?
us
Don't be
spaceships.
bigoted. Why are you assuming bad intentions from these non-terrestrial creatures? You're assuming that they want to kill us. I feel like you're a bit racist, Fowler. Assuming ill intent.
Listen, you can sing Kumbaya and hold hands with the aliens.
I'm not singing
I'm gonna be
kumbaya or anything like that. I'm just saying. I think you
I'm
have.
gonna have my I'm gonna have
I
my
think you need to check your
spacesuit and
privilege,
my
Fowler.
gun. I'm gonna
You
get
need to
my
check your
spacesuit
fucking
and my
privilege.
gun, and I'm gonna hide out in the Adirondacks, and we'll see who's alive in 5 years after that.
All right. Um, fucking John Wick. I don't know what you're gonna do. If the aliens come to get you, but um, from the sources I've read, the Grush dude, Grush, Grush. I think his name's Adam. Is it Adam Grush? Um, David Grush. Yes. Um, I believe at one point he said that he had interviewed 40 people over the course of 5 years, and all of the people who he interviewed were very, very high level security clearance. Um, but I don't know. It's it's I don't know. You know what I mean? Like this has such huge implications, but I think it's like what you said. The indictment and everything that's happening is so is so much more important with much heavier implications. And then I think too, mortal man is probably just not prepared to have this discussion.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I will have to see how this bears out. I mean, I it's all very new. This was 4 days ago. Um,
I think it's also very telling. Like, we've talked in the podcast earlier about how, like, RFK's conspiracy theories and Donald Trump's conspiracy theories, like, the distrust of the American government by the public is so high that, like, you can essentially win political power through basically just saying that the government is a conspiracy or is lying to you. And I think the alien stuff is it proves that as well, that, like, in like, for 20 years ago, the news story would be like the government lied. That's crazy. They lied about something of that import. But, like, now, past the Trump years, past the Bush years, like, the idea that the government has a massive cover up is, like, widely accepted as credible by a lot of people, and people aren't surprised or shocked or enraged in the same way they would have been, like, at an earlier point in history.
hmm Yeah, it's definitely regardless of what conclusions are made and what truth is found in this, it doesn't bode well for the legitimacy of the United States government. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I guess that's how I view this. Is like there's no good outcome. Um, the wheels have already been set in motion. The wheels are already turning. You know, the fact that this man has been given a platform and has been given media coverage, you know, whether or not it's disproven or proven, does not bode well for the reputation of, you know, Congress and for the reputation of certain aspects of the military and the intelligence departments.
Mm.
Um, you know, I read an opinion piece that, you know, and it kind of made me go, huh, this makes sense. And it was somebody basically saying, you know, the fact that he is allowed to have a platform proves that aliens are not real. Because if the government was, you know, committed to this huge cover up, he would have been shot in the back of the head a year ago.
Yeah, like I would be very surprised if it ends up being like, because I've heard people argue like maybe the UFOs aren't aliens, maybe it's just super advanced US military technology. I would be blown away if it actually was like some sort of technological advantage the government had and then they allowed it to be publicly aired. Like that would be pretty wild.
Yeah. Um,
I mean, if it ends up being true and aliens are real and they've been hiding it, it will be like the largest cover up in American history since like COINTELPRO.
no, it'll be the largest cover up in the history of the world. It won't just be, you know, the largest cover up in American history. It'll make every other country on earth come into question. You know, I think that's maybe why too. It's very hard for people to wrap their head around the gravity of the situation if for some reason this man were telling the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The exist
I would also be very surprised if the Chinese and the US government were both keeping the secret. Like the idea that and the Vatican may be more understandable, but the idea that like two rival superpowers would keep that a secret seems to me pretty
yeah.
unlikely.
Well, the Vatican is very small, and the Vatican is small enough to where they can keep their administrative and keep their shit under wraps. And the Vatican is a very old institution. Um, you know, so it's not. And the Vatican is in a very stable country and has, you know, with the exception of, you know, World War One and World War Two, and the Vatican was neutral in World War Two, from what I remember reading. I could be wrong, but the Vatican was a was you know because do you know a little bit about the Vatican, Fowler?
Yeah.
You know, it's an independent, autonomous sort of region in Italy. I've been
Do
to
they
it.
have their
It's
own army?
no, they use the Italian army. Um,
I
they
thought they
don't.
had a private. I thought they had a private military.
They have guards, but I, from what I've read, they're supplemented by the Italian military. Um,
Hmm.
but there's only about 1,000 people that live at the Vatican. 730 something men, 100 and something women. Or no, like yeah, like 900 men, like 100 women, or something like that. Um, but it's a very.
2019 population was 453 people apparently.
Oh, for real?
It's the smallest. Yeah, it's the smallest state in the world, both in area and in population.
Yeah. So they can keep their shit under wraps. Um,
And also, the Vatican is great at hiding secrets. They've done so many bad things that at this point they're masters.
yeah. So the Vatican, you know, being name dropped definitely isn't a surprise to me. You know. Um,
We'll have to see what the media is able to uncover about the guy's credibility.
hmm.
Until then, we won't really know.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the committees are being run by like hacks. Like Jim Jordan has a committee that's basically just spreading misinformation. So it could be he's been propped up. But
Yeah.
yeah, we won't know.
Yeah, we don't know, and I'm not going to make any hard speculations until we do discover the truth. I definitely think this is one of those stories that is just you can make yourself look like an ass if you cover it incorrectly. Uh, and I want to cover it correctly because I think that you know UFOs. That's like bait. That's like historic bait. You know what I mean? That's like the
Mm.
baitiest of bait. You know, you got a fucking UFO story. Oh, you got to cover it. You know. So
Yeah, yeah.
the government hiding alien technology. Oh shit! I have not heard that except for the plot of every alien movie ever to be made. Uh,
Turns out, what's that movie? Independence Day. It's a documentary.
yeah, it's literally just somebody went back in time, whispered in Will Smith's ear, "Yo, dog, you need to star in that movie."
Will Smith may enjoy assaulting people, but you have to admit he was very good in that film.
He was. He was very, very good in that movie. Um. So yeah. So we'll keep the story. Smooth sailing. I gotta end this podcast. I have to pee horribly. And I don't want to leave. So we're gonna go ahead. The episode's 40 minutes, so we're gonna go ahead and cut this off. Fowler, do you have any closing statements you want to make?
If the government does have a bunch of secrets from aliens, I will give them credit. We often shit on the government on this podcast and talk about how stupid they are, but well played, government. That was a good trick you did.
Yeah. No. If it ends up being there are aliens, I want y'all to not be horny. Okay. I want y'all to calm the fuck down. All right. Nobody's smashing any alien cheeks. We don't know what they look like. We don't know if they'd want you anyway. You. So that's all I'll say about that. Uh, need y'all to chill out. I love how it's dead silence, Fowler. You ain't even. You thought that was funny. I can hear you breathing, trying not to laugh.
I only laugh at the good jokes. I'm like the cultural critic on this podcast. I determine what's good and isn't good.
You want to know what's a good joke, Fowler?
What?
Space is a good joke.
Your comedy is almost as bad as your Russia takes.
Why are you getting on to me about the Russia shit as if I was the one that said there would be a civil war? All I said was there could be a civil war. I didn't say there would be. I said there could be, possibly, depending on what happens. And I was
the people have the episode. They can go.
No, they don't. Yeah, okay, fine. I'll take the L for my Russia take. I told you, content brain. I wanted shit to pop off so I could talk about it. um. But yeah, y'all, thank y'all for watching and for not watching, it's the blank screen, for listening to the podcast. And we'll keep you guys updated on the latest news. This has been Week Old Beans with your host, R. and Fowler. Thank y'all so much for listening, and I will see you in the next podcast.